presidency is entering the fourth quarter. Interesting stuff happens in the fourth quarter, and I'm looking forward to it.
You know, he's right. The fourth quarter for the president certainly has been interesting. Instead of becoming a lame duck, the president is making Republicans duck and run for cover. Just last week, the Supreme Court upheld his signature achievement, Obamacare, doing so for the second time. The High Court also legalized gay marriage, and that's on top of a big win for the president getting his trade bill passed, thanks in large part to the Republicans in Congress. And his stirring eulogy for the slain South Carolina pastor, a speech that many say raised the debates about race and guns to whole new levels. All of that worked, by the way, to raise his approval rating as well. He's now above 50%, or at 50%, for the first time in more than 2 years. Michael, is the president's mojo back?
Certainly he's had a good run, and yes, but the timing of the court announcements are what they are, and the decisions were not his. It just happened to have broken his way in a big way. But as I've always said on this panel, elections are about choices, and people being polled are now faced with the prospect of either thinking fondly and warmly of the incumbent president, or the 14 characters running in the Republican race, or hearing about Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Marty O'Malley, I think, who else is running, and they're disheartened, and they're thinking, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to hear about between now and November 2016. So this sounds good. He's had a good run. I'm going to go with this guy for a little while.
Noam, is it that he's doing well by comparison to the candidates who are running for his job, or are people just starting to feel like, hey, you know, this is why we liked him in the first place, this is why we elected him?
I think it's more the second, and I think the three items you cited all have the effect of highlighting strengths of Obama's and highlighting what it is that got him elected in the first place. So first, you know, the Affordable Care Act is a remarkable achievement. It really caps a century of efforts to extend health insurance to Americans. And he applied blood, sweat, and tears to getting it done, paid a huge political price for it. And this Supreme Court decision is kind of an exclamation point at the end of his sentence, which said it worked. It was a success. And those who predicted gloom and doom have been proven wrong, and now millions of people are benefiting. So that's one. Second, the speech that he gave in South Carolina is evidence of just how effective he can be at speaking to a particular moment in a genuine and emotional way, with eloquence and meaning at a level that very few politicians can. And with respect to gay marriage, it illustrates the degree to which he reflects the cultural and social future of this country and not the past.
But the speech that you referenced, the eulogy in Charleston, Scott, in the days after Sandy Hook, the president gave a very similar, moving, eloquent speech that did nothing. It advanced the debate in no way whatsoever. How much of this is the president and his ability to sort of redouble that message and connect with people again, or if people tuned out and they're just voting for the policy? Hey, the policies are good, I like them, let's thumbs up.
I don't think the speech had anything to do with his bump. I think it was a great speech. He's given some terrific speeches on race in this country, but that isn't it. I think, and the mayor knows this, when you're the executive, good and bad things that happen to you, government, apply to you. So the Supreme Court, even though it's the Supreme Court, it applied to him. You know, and by the way, the decision I think is flawed, but that's another story. And I'm not against gay marriage. The decision is flawed, but that's another.
That's another debate for another show.
But it also, I think, is suddenly he succeeded in getting the Republican legislature, Congress, to work with him. The whole problem with Washington has been this division, and I think he was shown to have some strength there. I think the decisions by the Supreme Court, although he did lose the Supreme Court decision on carbon or emissions by power plants, but no one really cares about that at the moment. They'll worry about that later. Doesn't get as much media coverage as other things. So I think it's mostly because the Supreme Court and those things kind of help bolster his hopeful legacy, and I think that's what it was.
And forgive me, David, but each of these decisions and each of these successes speak to very specific constituencies that are very vocal and very present. So we have marriage equality is what it is, and it's out there, and people care very deeply about it. It's a generational issue. The Affordable Care Act, it being upheld, means that these 6 million Americans, I think the number is 6 million, who received coverage under it, get to keep it, so they're out there writing about it. And then the trade bill speaks to the future and speaks to something that businesses and folks on the right care deeply about. So you sort of get enveloped, and of course the speech in Charleston after that tragedy spoke to constituencies of color. So you're sort of enveloped in this approval right? In folks and in constituencies that care deeply and are very vocal about their preferences.
Normally, it takes several years after a president leaves office before their poll numbers, before the public appreciates them. Thank you, and their poll numbers come back up. But in terms of popularity, in Mr. Obama's case, I mean, wouldn't we all want to be in the seat that he's in right now? You're a lame duck. Just a few months ago, folks were saying you're completely irrelevant to the process, and all the talk was on Hillary Clinton. And now, to a degree, with the great help of a divided Supreme Court, he has almost redefined his presidency for the history books. So I think the speech in South Carolina had absolutely nothing to do at all. I mean, he gives a good speech sometimes, not even all the time, sometimes. Because I've seen him give some speeches where it's like, Mr. President, you're not on today. But in credit, the South Carolina speech was good. His poll numbers are up now. We'll see what happens going forward. But this is a step in the right direction for him.
I'm going back in my memory, trying to remember the end of other two-term presidencies, and Clinton was involved in the whole Lewinsky scandal. Reagan seemed less effective in his last 2 years in office. Before that, you got to go back to Eisenhower. I mean, you're going a long way back. Is he a lame duck? Everybody assumed he was going to be a lame duck and pretty powerless at this point in his administration. Scott, is he a lame duck? And
I don't really buy that because he proved that if he worked with the Republican Congress, whether you like them or not, by the way, and policy-wise, that he's not. That he can work through these things. I mean, it had to work to get that trade bill done. But I mean, he's not done with the big issues. I wouldn't be jumping into his shoes.
It's also the Republicans that are rebranding their image and their legacy, because the fact is, and as the Times correctly pointed out today, today, he had to trust the people who have been thwarting his agenda for the past many years. But look, I mean, as you said, Dominic, usually you have to wait a little while. We're revisiting the Nixon presidency and highlighting his strengths and accomplishments there.
But Michael, just to finish what I was going to say, in foreign affairs, he's got enormous challenges here with ISIS, Iran, the deal with Iran, the trade pact, which he still has to negotiate. I mean, there are lots of things there that could go sour as we move forward.
No?
Well, look, I think whether he's effective or not depends on how you define effectiveness. If it's in terms of a legislative product, then I think the trade bill is going to be the exception rather than the rule. But he's shown that he's willing to push the envelope in terms of executive orders. He's shown that he's quite capable of using the bully pulpit in order to move the discussion. He's quite capable of using the veto pen to block things that he doesn't like. And as Scott pointed out, in the realm of foreign affairs, the president has a unique role in American society. So I don't think he's a lame duck by any stretch of the imagination, but there are certain things that he will not be able to accomplish with a Congress that's dominated by the opposition party.
Last question. We're watching these favorability numbers. That's what we do. As are the candidates who are running for the White House. If you're Hillary Clinton or if you're any of the Republicans, Hillary Clinton must love seeing his number climbing. The better he does, the better she does. Is that the general thinking here, and the worse or the more difficult it is for Republicans?
With Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren opining all the time on how awful the trade pact is, and the fact that Obama needed to go to Republican Congress because he was thwarted by his own party. No, I mean, the success there is not something that Hillary or any Democrats need to emulate when they're dealing with the Democratic base that rejected the pact. On the other issues, yes, it also takes, it's also about burning time at this point, and the focus is now back on him, so they get a week off.
But no, it does matter. It does matter. I mean, every election is at some level fundamentally a question of change or more of the same. And if people are feeling generally good about the condition of the country and about the presidency, then the president's party will be rewarded and the candidate of that party will be rewarded. So I think it does benefit Hillary Clinton when we get to the general election, assuming the numbers stay where they are. Let's also not overstate this. I mean, his approval rating moved from, 44% to 50%. It makes for a nice narrative, especially after this week, but we're not talking about huge differences that are far outside of the margin of error. And I don't doubt that it's going to continue to fluctuate throughout his presidency.
And they're going to go down, the poll numbers, as these other issues and challenges come up. And more importantly, she has got to establish, she being Hillary, that she's different. This makes it much more difficult. She's going to have to take these things on. So I think it's made it more difficult for her.
Different, but she has to energize the base. And the way that she can energize the base is if the president's numbers are up.
Or if they feel they're under siege. It could go either way.
Right.
That's interesting, Scott.
All right, we'll take a break. Up next, everybody's still buzzing about the Supreme Court decisions in favor of Obamacare and same-sex marriage. But the High Court also ruled on housing discrimination last week in a case that you might have missed. and that decision could impact our area as much, if not more, than the others.